our worldview is the one thing that we have, right? I think it is the most important thing that we carry around with us. And I think one of the things that we don't recognize is this way that these sort of micro stressors build up within us and then come out in things like the way that we do work, right? So I think we have to recognize that that there are micro stressors going on all around us and that we have a limited capacity to deal with them. This was really driven home for me when there was sort of a local tragedy where like people were just on edge and it erupted into a violent outburst. And it really struck me that what happened there, by the way, at an eighth grade
Mm.
basketball game, right? At a middle school basketball game. And I looked at that situation, I said, wow, all of these people were under such stress and tension that there was sort of a kickoff outcome. I wasn't there. I can't report on what was happening, but there was some kickoff moment that led people to such stress and acrimony that it became this violent affair at a kid's basketball game,
At a
right?
kid's basketball game.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think what that is
Not among
important
the
to say,
kids,
not
among
among the
the,
among the parents, it should be said.
yeah.
So, but you have to think, what were these people listening to in the car on the way there? What stressors were they undergoing, trying to get the kids in the car and all of that kind of stuff, right? All that stuff is building up. And I think what we're not recognizing is how much stress is going into our ears and we're just absorbing it. We are becoming so inundated with negative news that we'll have it on in the background and we won't even recognize that our brains are absorbing some really horrible stuff, right? And if we
Yeah.
don't recognize that there's all that noise going around, we can't recognize that we're all walking around with our boiling point raised just above, blowing our lids, right? Most of us, maybe we used to walk around before that we were so inundated with negativity. We used to walk around with maybe 50, 60% headroom before we blew our lid, right? If you imagine kind of like a graduated cylinder, like, a tube here. We used to walk around with, 50, 60% left in the tank before we lost it, before we felt burnt out, before we snapped at somebody. But what has happened is we have sort of absorbed so much negativity that headroom is shrinking more and more by the day. And so now we've got less and less ability to deal with stressors in our lives, right? So if we're constantly got all these sort of little bits, these little annoyances, these loud rooms that we're in, that suddenly we only have a 10% capacity for stress before we blow our lids, then we are walking around in a bad way. And I think it's really important for us to understand what happens when we sort of boil over, when we reach that maximum capacity.
Before you go there, I wanna just, what you're talking about is these little microaggressions that we're becoming aware of
I don't know if
during the course
I
of.
think microaggression is a different definition, but they're like micro stressors. This
Okay,
is
that.
this is the thing. It's a micro stressor.
So this could be some mean-spirited thing we saw on social media when we woke up in the morning. It could be some talk show that we listen to regularly on the
Yes.
way to work. Could
Yes.
be, tuning into a particular news outlet that just is relentlessly negative about the world and
It could be
scary
our
things.
and then add in your kid doing something right before you're trying to get out the door, or them forgetting to do their homework, or telling you that you have to pack a lunch before because 'cause they're on a field trip today. You name it, any of us are going through a bunch of stressors in our lives.
Okay,
A parent that's injured, right, and then you add on top of that the negative media.
and the stuff that you chose to engage in, because this
Mhm.
is where I'm all about reminding people that giving our attention to craziness and negativity on the internet is a choice. And so yeah, your kids are going to do nutty things at 7:30 in the morning just when you're walking out the door. Yeah, the dog's going to do something terrible in the middle of the kitchen floor. All the things, those things you can't control, but we can control what we're giving our attention to in the media, social media, news, and so forth. And that, as I understand how you explain it, is what's bringing us closer to the boiling point. And that's sort of by choice if we tune
Right.
into that stuff all the time.
Right. It's by choice, and I don't even know if it's by choice anymore. It's just by negligence is sort of a bad word for it, but it's what's been on, and so it just stays on. Think about how many little kids are just exposed to the news all the time because it's just on in houses, or the
Right.
talk radio is on in cars. I mean, just like we have to, treat ourselves sometimes like little kids and say, is this an appropriate time for me to be exposing myself to this before I have
Right.
to go into a hard day's work.
Yeah.
Listen, it's good to be informed, but you don't have to be informed 100% of the time if it's harming your ability to interact with people in a productive and meaningful way, and if it's harming your ability to, have your livelihood, right? I
Yeah.
think that we have to understand that, and I'll go back to this too. When we boil over, we can get into fight, flight, or freeze. Some workplaces, fighting is somewhat okay. You can lose your temper at Kathy, and that's fighting. You can flight, you can leave. Most of us can't leave our jobs immediately, but we can certainly shut down and we can sort of cognitively leave, right? Or we can freeze, right? We can get into this state of self preservation that I think a lot of us are calling sort of disengagement, right? That freeze and that flight response are disengagement.
Mhm.
And so if we are disengaged in our work, or if we're people that lead organizations and we're seeing a lot of our employees are disengaged, that's probably not a result of the work or but the workplace could be contributing to stressors. We could be not properly supporting people when they walk in the door. I mean, listen, we've all had hard days where someone cut us off. We had a hard day at work, someone cut us off in traffic, we listened to some horrible news report, and then we walk into our home. And did our attitude change from the car to walking into our house? No. And our homes are our most important places, where the people we love live, where the animals we love live, where the food we love is, okay? And if we can't even change our attitude about reset our attitude and our way of being when we walk into our most important space in the world, our homes, well then we certainly as employers can't expect people to do that when they walk into our offices
Mhm.
or our workplaces. And so it's on us to A, create workplaces that help to decrease the headspace between sort of our base attitude and boiling over. And I think it's also important as employees to recognize that and maybe request just some quiet time in the morning, maybe a low comms time right in the morning so I can get my head in the right place. As employers, instituting a low comms time, maybe putting out a positive news article now and then. If we go back to what I was talking about before, that
Mhm.
study where, the researcher found that between 90 seconds and 4 minutes of positive news reduced people's anxiety by 32%, increased their optimism by 18%, and increased their feelings of gratitude by 12%. Why not institute some kind of positive news as a part
Yeah.
of the workplace? And will everyone adopt it? No, but I think what we will see is that we will start to see workplaces where people are experiencing more gratitude. I mean, just imagine in your workplace if people said thank you 12% more. If people,
Yes.
instead of looking at a job that needed doing, were like, "This is
Right.
never gonna work," and instead they 18% more of the time, almost 20% of the time, they were like, "Yeah, we can figure this out." What would that feel
Yes.
like? If 32% of the time people were you went to meetings and everyone wasn't stressed out? I mean, if a third of the times you went into a meeting, it was a positive and happy place to be, my goodness, that would totally change the way that you do work and the way that work gets done.